One thing's for sure, the time that I was gone from China, personal freedoms have gotten even more restrictive. You've got to go through one set of gates and scans and baggage checks, and then be ushered around, and then go through another set of gates, and then get scanned and photographed and ID'd again the second time before you even go into the rail station. And then before getting on the actual high-speed rail, you've got to also have your ID checked a third time and have your ticket scanned in the automatic gates. So, it's very hypocritical to me that China talks about how they want to open up the world and they want to transplant their form of government and economic model to the rest of the world, but internally there are perhaps even more controls on human movements, more controls than ever on personal freedom, and less autonomy than what it has been prior. So the consolidation of power with Xi Jinping and the direction that they're heading, this is Prison Planet. I mean, if you think that the United States is turning that direction and the rest of the world, well, they're on not on equal footing with the Chinese. I mean, they've got it down to a science. And so any hopes of the Chinese people actually becoming free and having a system where they can participate in all aspects of it, which is what a freedom humanistic system is, you can forget that, because it's like I said, this is just chaos. This is not during a holiday season. This is how it is now. And I can see the day where you'll be fingerprinted and maybe your iris will be scanned as an ID model or a chip implant just to get on the train. It makes you wonder how much are the Chinese willing to take. They are very resilient people when it comes down to it. I mean, if you look at the shit that their government has put them through over the decades, they're very resilient people. I don't know, how much more they can take. I mean, as long as the wealth rolls in for them and more people are allowed to come to the middle class and more opportunities abroad to study, work, and whatnot, they might be able to endure. But for any Western born and raised human being to put up with some of this stuff would be impossible, because like I said before in this channel, we are freedom loving people, and all people should be. So when we talk about freedom, we have to define what freedom is, because surprisingly there are a lot of voices out there that claim to know what freedom is but have no idea how to define it. In other words, they don't know what freedom actually is. Okay, what is it in practice? It means the right to your personal effects, the right to be able to control what goes in your body, the right to defend your family, and that means yes, with a firearm. The right to freedom of speech, freedom of press, the right to have a trial from the jury of your peers only, so no kangaroo court system. That's unfortunately not the case with anything to do with the IRS or some other types of trials where you don't get a jury of your peers, but that has been perverted in the West. It certainly is perverted here. This is a kangaroo court system. Lawyers are basically government officials. There's no such thing as a personal injury lawyer that has the ability to take down the state, especially if the state-run companies. You're going to get maybe a payout, but as far as having landmark decisions, landmark cases of personal freedoms where companies that do wrongs are forced to do rights or dissolved. That simply is not the case here under this system. But what else? Oh, the right to breed and the right to reproduce as see fit between two consenting adults, obviously. The right to own property, that's a big one. That's a big one. The right to actually own property, and that means no liens on your property through taxes, confiscation, or otherwise. Those are just some of the basic personal rights that all should have. Inside your borders, outside your borders. It's something you're born with. The concept escapes most of the people in the Far East, in the Middle East, and in other locales throughout the world. But if we look at common law, we go way back to common law in jolly old England. You'll see that Magna Carta, things of that nature, documents that have come out, and ideologies have been able to basically take down states. Okay, King of England was taken down through the argument of human rights and having rights granted by God, of course, in a nutshell, and not granted by another human being. You can't grant somebody rights if you're on the same level as them. It has to be from the top down. So that's just a few thoughts. Obviously, it's more complicated than that, and there are more personal freedoms that are guaranteed to every living human being. And to a certain extent, some of those should be granted to animals too. Now, animal cruelty is a whole other topic, and I could show you some horror stories here. But of course, the right to vote, and that is something that doesn't seem to really bother a lot of citizens here, and it should. You can vote locally on some elections within your community. They've allowed some of that, but of course, as you can deduce from that, the candidates are handpicked by the party. Same thing going on in Hong Kong. The candidates are handpicked by Beijing. So you have a choice in places like Hong Kong and smaller communities for smaller chieftains and viceroys of your locale. But if they're all vetted by the Communist Party, you don't really have a choice. You don't have writing candidates. You can't nominate somebody. You certainly can't form a political party and gather up support monetarily. That is a kiss of death here, because they can't allow any threats to their inner circle. They can't allow people to have, and well, the right to solicit is obviously not not something they're taking away. You can solicit the hell out of somebody like that guy just did to me. You can do white collar crime is what I'm saying. To rip somebody off for money and not give them any guarantees or give them their money back, that's fair game. That's fair and square. Any violent crime is just almost taboo. I mean, that people freak out with violence, but so there are some areas, some gray areas that you may be able to get used to if need be. I've had to get used to it. Had no choice having to live here. Of course, I do have more flexibility than most of the people that are born here, and that's not fair. I mean, I'm not saying that it's something that I'm proud of, because it's just not fair that foreigners should have preferential treatment. I would say that at my own expense, I would understand completely if they we're ticketing some foreigners that were doing illegal activities more often. Like yours truly, clear as vodka, riding around on a motorcycle years back with no papers and no license. But I didn't end up killing anybody, including myself. So it all worked out in the end. But that's my little rant on personal freedoms and how things are today, 2018, compared to when I spoke about this topic as far back as 2011, 2010. And in some cases it's getting worse, in some cases it's better. Movement of people, being able to cross borders has improved, by the way. It's less of a streamlined process, but they're allowing more people to do it. So if you're able to jump through the hoops like you are through the TSA, you can cross borders and you can do things abroad and you can open up companies abroad and things of that nature. Although they're paid close attention to capital flight, but besides that, I think the major things are unattainable by a mainland-born Chinese. The participation in their country as if it is theirs, and it ought to be theirs, owned by the people, the masses, not by a select few of 2,000-3,000 inter-party members and their cabal of oligarch businessmen. And that opens up a whole other topic too for women's rights, which are still not on par with the rest of the world. And if you're going to call yourself a leader in the world, if you're going to claim that China should be number one in a bunch of areas, you can't have that kind of activity at home and be hypocritical in that way. Just my 2 cents. I don't know what you think. For those of you that have lived here or visited here, I think you know what I'm saying, and you may agree with much of what I've said. Religious freedom. Yes, there is religious freedom in China, though it's difficult to define exactly how far it goes and what are the limitations of it, because you're able to dress in your religious garb, you're able to meet with your peers at a setting that is set up as being a place of worship, and you're able to form religions as long as you're paying taxes. There is no tax-free shelter for churches here like there is in many parts of the West. But there are resources for the Chinese government to spy on religion, churches, and they've done that before. They've demolished churches. They've put them into a construct that is almost like it's a business entity that pays taxes to the government, and business entities that are approved by the government and have restrictions and boundaries placed by the government are always able to be dissolved by the government very easily. So that's how they keep the religious sects in line here, by getting them to agree to these stipulations before they can actually form the religion, have their mosque, their synagogue, their church, whatever that may be. And that's the guise of free religion and freedom of expression of your religious beliefs in China, because for decades the Communist Party has claimed that they do not believe in God. And I don't believe there's ever been a communist government of a nation that has believed in God per se. It's really a godless form of government, and that should worry you as well. Not just the totalitarian aspect of it, not just the hypocritical nature of it when it comes to a share of the economic structure, but just the fact that they don't believe in God. They've placed themselves at the head of the table, on top of the pyramid, as they are living gods. And that's a flawed construct. and that's why it can never last. The time's always ticking on a nation that adopts communism as its form of government. It's just a matter of time. It's taken a lot longer than anyone had anticipated here, but that's where it's got to head. All logic in consideration. And on a side note, the banks. The banking system in China is owned by the government, but it should be owned by the people. In other words, if it's going to be a free and open society and a benevolent society, and one that can be a model that other countries can aspire to and be a leader in the world, they have to allow the people to own the banking system. And not as they say it is now, but actually own the banking system. In other words, when you lend money, when you invest capital from the banks, you can't give preferential treatment to certain state-run companies. And you can't charge what is considered loan sharking fees to customers that want microloans. Microloans should be interest-free because the people don't have the ability to pay as much as a state-run company. And I believe that that is truly benevolent. If you have proof of income that is quite low, you need microloans, you should not have to pay a fee. That should be a service provided by the government and the people-owned bank. One of my greatest fears as a freedom-loving individual, and not just for my own tribe, but freedom-loving for every person, is that the Chinese model becomes the accepted norm. That over the next generation or two, people accept this type of construct versus what they know today to be a free and open society. And that's something that I can't really control much more than what I'm doing. It's something that I don't think that people have the fiber and the quality of being, most of them, and that is not just the Chinese, but also people back home, unfortunately, who would stand up for their brother or sister who's got the stones to say enough is enough. We're not going to be treated as unequals. We're going to be treated as masters and commanders of our own reality. So I'm going to do a video here coming up shortly on the citizen point system in China. Yes, they have a point system, and the point system allows the government to control the narrative in China, to control the behavior of Chinese people. So in case they get uppity in any way, they have a point system, and if their point system does not line up properly with what an ideal little communist should be in the mainland, then they won't be able to own property, get loans, travel abroad, and do things of that nature. So, like I was saying, there are in some ways a lot more constraints today than there was. And this point system is really a scary thing. It's like 1984 on steroids, and it's something that is being discussed in where else? The EU, Canada, United States, and other nations. And you should really be aware of it, because it's quite a scary prospect that, again, the Chinese model becomes the norm where you're at. And if that happens, and if there's enough controls in place, you and your family, your offspring, don't really have a future.